Hi, welcome back. In this segment, we're going to talk about tracking or following the flow of certainty. There's probably one, secret to really understanding how to make logical reasoning clear is to structure your argument in such a way that the audience can follow clearly the flow of certainty as it moves through the different components. So we're going to take a familiar example and maybe add a few touches to it so you can see how that flow can be tracked. So we're starting with Barack and as the subject, and is a natural-born citizen of the United States. So this is a format following connecting the dots. Now the dots, remember, not full sentences. So, and in this scenario, we've got a judge, a plaintiff, and a defendant. So here, the defendant is saying, they're making the claim, this is their conclusion, that Barack is a natural-born citizen of the United States. And the defendant's assessment from the defendant's perspective that the amount of certainty that travels from Barack down to is a natural-born citizen of the United States through that nexus of predication, through that connection, according to the defendant, it's 100%. The judge says in this hypothetical, well, I don't really see the connection here. I don't see the connection between Barack and is a natural-born citizen of the United States. The judge isn't saying he or she disagrees. The judge is just saying that at this point, I don't see the connection. So the defendant responds and says, well, I've got two premises, Your Honor, that support my conclusion. One, that Barack was born in Hawaii. And two, one such who was born in Hawaii is a natural-born citizen of the United States. So Barack is a natural-born citizen of the United States. And the way the defendant perceives that line of reasoning is 100% of the certainty can reach to the finish, so that this, from the defendant's point of view, is this conclusion is 100% certain, according to the defendant. Well, the judge comes along and says, well, I don't really see the connection between Barack and was born in Hawaii. I do see some connection between one who was born in Hawaii as a natural-born citizen of the United States. But there's a gap here that I can't jump across. So in the logic bridge template, these questions here reflect that it's uncertain to the court how you get from Barack to was born in Hawaii. So the defendant says, well, I've got three, that should be a two, here's a three, but there's three premises here that will make this connected in the line of reasoning. Number one, Barack was issued a Hawaiian certificate of live birth. Number two, one such who was issued a Hawaiian certificate of live birth was born in Hawaii. And number three, one such who was born in Hawaii is a natural-born citizen of the United States. Therefore, my conclusion is Barack is a natural-born citizen of the United States. And here again, from the defendant's point of view, and we always start out with 100% in moving the certainty, from the defendant's point of view, all of that reaches to the end. Well, the plaintiff has something to say about that. So you have the defendant's perception that this was 100% all the way through. But from the plaintiff's point of view, the plaintiff uses, what we've talked about, a diverting attack, and says, okay, I can accept this part here. Barack was issued a Hawaiian certificate of live birth. But the plaintiff says, I don't think the connection goes down to here. I think it goes from here to here, diverting that flow. So the plaintiff says, one who was issued a Hawaiian certificate of live birth might have had parents who were legal residents of Hawaii who applied under the born out-of-state exception under Section 338-17.8. So, linking to this first premise, the defendant moves in this direction, but the plaintiff makes an objection through a diverting attack and says, nope, it ought to travel this way. And then the plaintiff finishes off by saying, one who might have had parents who were legal residents of Hawaii who applied under the born out-of-state exception under Section 338-17.8 is not a natural-born citizen of the United States. So here, from one perspective, this 100% of certainty gets divided. And this might be the judge's perception that, 40% certain this way and 60% here. So that weakens the amount, putting this diverting line of dots, the channel for which this certainty can move, can reduce the ultimate amount of certainty that's perceived for the original conclusion. Here's another example where the plaintiff says, and here this is a obstruction attack. The plaintiff agrees, okay. Well, actually, here he doesn't agree. The statement is Barack was issued a Hawaiian certificate of live birth. But the plaintiff says the premise that Barack was issued a Hawaiian certificate of live birth is inconsistent with defendants' others' claims. So the plaintiff is saying no certainty should move beyond here because there's an inconsistency. So if that's true, that there's inconsistency, that might affect the judge's perception of the amount of total certainty that could be attached to this conclusion. Now here we have the opposing attack, where the defendant is arguing Barack was born in Hawaii. One who was born in Hawaii is a natural-born citizen of the United States. And the plaintiff is arguing to the court, Barack was born in Hawaii. One who was born in Hawaii is not a natural-born citizen of the United States. So, since this is 100% here, and these two at the ends have to add to 100%, by adding an opposing attack, you can reduce the amount that's available for the original conclusion. Here you have an example of the branching lines. This is where the defendant is creating at this point, two separate lines of reasoning. that both support right here. So this line states Barack was issued a Hawaiian certificate of live birth. One who was issued a Hawaiian certificate of live birth was born in Hawaii. So at this point, if you were arguing Barack was born in Hawaii, from this line, this normally would be a 30, but there's another pathway that can create more access for this certainty to get here. And here, this reads, Barack had his birth announcement published in the Honolulu Advertiser on August 4th, 1961. And then the next premise right here is one who had his birth announcement published in the Honolulu Advertiser on August 4th, 1961, was born in Hawaii. So while this only had a 30% amount of certainty, this one might have had 60. Now, you don't just add the numbers together, but I just picked here hypothetically that might raise your level of certainty here to 80%. And then both lines finish off with the premise, one who was born in Hawaii is a natural-born citizen of the United States. And apparently if the 80% made it all the way to the bottom, then at least for this premise, it's depicted as 100% because there was no reduction in the amount of certainty as it passed through here. Now here, of course, you can see the branching that we've just discussed, but you also have the addition of the plaintiff doing diverting attacks at each place here in which they argue alternate positions that move to the opposite conclusions. And finally, this is just a little snapshot of how involved two sides of an argument can be in terms of trying to track, the ultimate flow of certainty that moves along. Sometimes this is called an inferential net, where all the different channels of inference are put together in a single picture. So remember, if you can construct your arguments in a way that the flow of certainty can be followed, like the phrase, follow the money, well, in argument, it's follow the certainty. And if you can track that from start to finish, then you know that the argument at least has a logical form, and that form should be clear to the audience. Thank you.